Because, Paul, we've got to remember that manipulation and persuasion are the same neuroscience. They're exactly the same. The only difference is intent.
Welcome back to Avidly Talks, a mostly marketing, sales and HubSpot focused podcast, but we're focusing on sales today. We are joined by Alan Versteeg. He has worked with some massive global companies, Amazon Web Services, Bridgestone, AstraZeneca. I've got a couple of family members who worked at AstraZeneca. They have a plant not far from here. You proved no matter how advanced the tech, it's people, not platforms, who close deals. And we're going to be talking about sales today, a bit more about you, Alan, in a moment. But how's it going? Joining us from South Africa.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Yes, calling from Durban, South Africa.
How's the weather down there at the moment?
It is very humid, as always is on the east coast of Africa.
Yeah, it's quite different to what some of our colleagues are experiencing. They're just coming out the depths of winter inside the Arctic Circle, so send them some warmth for us. You're the co-founder of Growth Matters International. You've been working for over a decade helping businesses reach their full potential, and you've worked across 45 different countries, over 2,000 sales managers. There's no replacement for human interaction in your view, that's right, isn't it?
That's correct.
Yeah, cool. So we're going to look at today how helping sells and how you help people make their sales team shift from focusing on being a seller to a guide. What does that mean?
Well, I think the starting point is we have a perception about sales portrayed by Hollywood that doesn't actually tie up with what the highest performing sales performers do. There's a wonderful book called Selling with Noble Purpose. And it highlights that the top performing salespeople have that noble purpose. There's a calling greater than just the product or service. And a good way to punchline that is selling won't help, but helping will sell. And the minute we take on that and we go, what is it I'm trying to help my customer do? And why do I believe what we're doing does that best? Well, then you operate from a completely different frame of reference when you're selling.
Brilliant. And does this apply everywhere? I presume this can any salesperson can unlock this.
It's 100% applies everywhere, and I'll tell you why. So often we're busy focusing on training the competence of our sales professionals, but not working on the character. And if you speak to customers about why they don't buy, they're seldom going to mention, obviously to the salesperson, they'll probably say price. But if you do the actual research, they'll say things that are character related. Well, they seemed a bit pushy, or they were too product centric, or they weren't listening to my needs. And all of that comes from a frame of our character. If I sell with noble intent, if I believe I'm there to serve and I operate from that mindset, then the skills start to take care of themselves. Because, Paul, we've got to remember that manipulation and persuasion are the same neuroscience. They're exactly the same. The only difference is intent. So when we bring that intent forward, then we can leverage the skills to be more effective at selling. But also believing that we'd be negligent to be denying customers the value we can bring. Because I often see salespeople saying, well, I don't know how to upsell, I don't know how to cross-sell. And I'm going, well, you're being negligent, because if you know it brings value to their world, why would you sell them 3 glasses of water a day when you know they need 8? So we need to step up to the profession of selling.
What's the noble intent part of it mean? Can you break that down?
It fundamentally means that we think about our customer's customer, or our customer's world, or our customer's outcome. So we're always operating from a space of what is popularized as business for business. So whether you're business to consumer or business to business, everyone's selling to someone else. Everyone's got a business where they're trying to add value to their shareholders. So noble intent says I operate from a place where I treat your business or your personal life as my own, and I consider what I would do in that situation with my knowledge. And then it's my job to bring you to an awareness of a problem you didn't know you had and a solution you didn't know you needed. But it's ethically based, because it's with noble intent of something you actually need. It's not based on manipulation.
And how do you give us an example of how you can uncover that? So instead of identifying a challenge, does it go further? Do you talk about different points of reference instead of stick with the 8 glasses of water analogy because it's so transferable. Is it because
Yeah, you want to be understanding the world they operate in. And the metaphor I like to use is you're a Sherpa. And a Sherpa is someone who guides someone up a mountain who's done it 1,000 times. But you're not the hero of the story, the customer is. But you know things they don't know. You've seen blind spots they don't know. To use a different example, I worked with a lady in property finance, and she worked with some of the biggest developers in our country. And she said to me the one day, she said, Al, I can't be the Sherpa. These people have so much experience. They're multi-billionaires. They know what they're doing. What role do I play? And I asked her a question. I said, your biggest customer, how many property deals has he done this year? And she said he's done 3, but they're massive. And I said, great. How many property finance deals have you done this quarter? She said about 35. You can see the penny starting to drop. So I said, in his team, you're the expert or the Sherpa in property finance. You're an asset to his team, but then you got to show up as an asset. You can't just be transacting. You got to be selling with noble purpose. What is it that he's trying to achieve in this project where I can bring my experience of going up and down this mountain 100 times to his world and help him to what he's trying to achieve? And that's noble purpose. I'm thinking about what they're trying to do and how I can play a role, not just my product or service offering, but my experience to the table.
And what's the opposite? What's the word? What is the opposite of noble intent? What would you describe it as, and give us an example?
Well, the opposite, and it's not probably the opposite, but I call it panicked aggression. So the flip side now, let's go up to organizational management. When we're pushing a quota, when we're pushing a number, when we're pushing a quarterly target, but we speak about customer centricity at our conferences, the salesperson becomes very panicked. And as a result, we become desperate. And that desperation moves us away from the outcome. And we become these great talking brochures. Well, these are the features, this is the advantage, you need to do it. I've got this quarter. We don't tell them I've got a quarterly target, but it becomes a pressure-based sale, and people pick up that energy. And they go,
or it becomes, I can probably do something on the price because it's close to the end of the month.
Yeah, there we go. So, and I always say to salespeople, if you're asking for discount, the easiest way to save money is to reduce cost of sale. And the biggest expense of a cost of sale is you, the salesperson. So if it's the sales going to happen at any price, well, then I don't need a sales professional. But that's what sales professionals do. They don't sell the product. We have experience in the outcome the customer's trying to drive. We can connect the dots. We can solutioneer for their world. And even if it's a transactional product, it's knowing how it relates and is relevant in their world. And Paul, that's the punchline. Relevance is the currency of value. Our job as salespeople is to find the relevance and then bring that to our customers.
How can people, what's some practical ways people can start uncovering that then? So it might be a discovery call, it might be early on in talking to potential customers, and this can be anybody, can't it? It's the same, you're talking about neurological steps and buying decisions and persuasion. This applies whether you're buying a new car or a new CRM software. So what are some practical ways people can start going down that path rather than getting them to work out which pricing tier they need from their service?
So I'm going to go high level, then I'm going to get practical, then I'm going to go to the cheat way we can do it nowadays. But effectively, we created something called the Sherpa Canvas, which looks at these 11 areas. Who are they? What are they trying to achieve? What are their challenges? And what do they commonly do to fix the challenges? Then the real Sherpa is, what is the unknown problem they don't know, and the unique way we address that problem. And then we move to the product. What do we have? What does it change? What do they get? Why are they scared to buy? So I used to spend a lot of time doing research around that. What I've done now is I've codified those questions into a GPT bot. So many times I can go, this is the industry, this is the customer, here's their website, here's the information, and I get 60 to 70% of what I need to now have a cheat sheet. But I've still got to apply the human nature to that. What does this mean in the world? How do the dots connect? How do I translate this into a sales conversation? But what I find is we're not using GPT and those kind of things as thinking tools. We're using them as grammar creators. I use it as a thinking partner. Shortcuts that journey. Now I can think about what's the actual problem. And then, to your point, Paul, we've got to ask the customer. So the way we do that is, what I found in my experience when dealing with organizations who are trying to deploy HubSpot across the organization, but struggling to because they're not sure how to manage the complexity, many have tried to fix that through additional consulting. However, what we found in our experience is that the right way to do that is actually look at how you find the highest leverage activities to do first, and then slowly and incrementally build that up. Through that, we've been able to help companies maximize their HubSpot investment. Is that something that might be relevant to you? that engineered statement is trying to meet them where they're at, not sell them what a thing, but get them to think about this. Because we have HubSpot, it's powerful, it's a huge tool, but as anything powerful, the more you bolt on, the harder it is to understand. And then people go, let's just build more, and say, no, let's get this piece working. Then anyway, so then you can get into a conversation of your expertise, which is knowing how to go along that journey.
Nice. I like it. And where do people struggle adopting this? When you're coaching people, or is it old habits? Is it a fear of not talking about the product enough? Like, what stops people?
Mostly it's organizational culture. So we are so busy drowning people in auditing themselves. So salespeople are filling out information as opposed to insights. And then
What
we're
do you mean?
measuring
Like
them.
figures, status of
Yeah, well,
leads?
it's almost like we have to justify existence. Go put this information in, fill in this call report, tell me what you did here. So we're so busy turning over our shoulder trying to prove why we exist. We're not focusing on the customer. As a result, we end up in these mindless meetings. So it brings me to the key problem. We don't have the time. It's not a skill problem. It's we don't protect the time to make sure that we show up, we don't rock up. It doesn't always translate, but rocking up is I just come up and my shirt's untucked and I arrived. But when you show up, you're prepared. So we no longer, specifically in this virtual world, going from meeting to meeting, we don't spend enough time in preparation. And as a result, we don't get that across because the customer can pick up. We haven't done our homework. We haven't come in prepared. And I'll just say this, sales is a practice. And like a lawyer practices and a doctor practices, as a profession of selling, you're always practicing. And to do that, it's about the preparation. So for me, Paul, it's not skill, it's seldom skill. It's often we just don't prioritize the time to make sure that we're the most relevant conversation the customer has that day.
It's very true, that. And it's so easy, isn't it, with these remote calls to just book them back to back, whereas you wouldn't do that if it was all in person. You'd give yourself, if you were at a conference or something, you give yourself 15 minutes to nip to the toilet, get a coffee or whatever.
Exactly. And before COVID, we used to have the luxury of transit. So in the transit, we'd be thinking through our message, doing some preparation. Now we end a call and start a call and we're going, okay, who is this? Where am I? What's going on? And we haven't fully prepared. And I say why that's important, Paul. Our business is to get onto planes, fly to countries, put people in a room and train them. And COVID hits. And you can imagine my panic going, our business that we've kept afloat for 8 years, how's it going to survive COVID? At that time, 8 years. How's it going to survive COVID? And 2 or 3 days of really being depressed about this. And I thought, well, I can't control what I can't control. What I can control is make sure that every call I get on, I'm the most relevant online call they've had this week. And I went and mastered camera techniques and voice tonality techniques and messaging techniques because the medium had changed. I couldn't leverage my personality the way I used to. But guess what it was? I treat it as a practice. So what I need to go advance the skill. And that was my one goal. I want to make sure that at the end of the week they're going, that call with Alan was really refreshing compared to everyone else they were talking to.
It's back to what you started with as well. So when you do this noble intent-based selling, and in quotation marks, deliberately, the happy customers I'm picturing are the ones who, like, I knew from the off that Kaz understood us. She just got what we were doing, or I made a connection with Damien or whatever. And it's,
yeah, you're spot on. Because the research says, Paul, and I mean, this comes quite a while back from Challenger Selling and the research they did. But if you punchline it, 9% of the reason they buy price to value ratio, 19% product and service, 19% brand, 53% sales experience. If you punchline that, how you sell is more important than what you sell, who you sell it for, or the price you sell it at. The differentiator, like you just said so well, Paul, is that actual initial sales engagement where people go, there's something about this that feels different. Now, if you've got a really bad product, that's not going to help you. If you've got a really bad market image, not going to help you. If you have a crazy price point, not going to help you. But when those things are market competitive, the only differentiator is the sales experience and how we engage with our customers.
It's true that, and people accept it on the customer side already, when you're delivering. We all understand everybody's messed up with customers. Everybody does, that's a fact. But if you know that if they like you and they trust you, they're going to stick with you when you've made a mistake. So starting it pre-sale, basically, building that human connection and trust, isn't it?
Spot on. And then Paul, if you elevate that out to the world of marketing, and the way I see marketing and sales is kind of 4 C's: connect, tell the market we exist; converse, have a conversation of value; convince, give them material to help make a decision; when they love you, champion them so they tell other people about you, right? But if you take that part of connect, the marketing message has to already start priming them for a conversation of noble intent. So we should be giving value, not taking value. And we know this from HubSpot, right? Here's a white paper, here's an infographic, here's a assessment tool. These are the things we can do. But there's no point we do that and we haven't trained the sales professional how to mirror that. So the disconnect either happens that you've added all this value, but now that you've warmed me as a prospect, the sales conversation is completely opposite. It feels very like you're just taking. Or the flip side is the marketing message never gets to an appointment because it's just, give me your stuff. Can I connect? Can I have your information? Can I drown you in GPT copied messages on LinkedIn? So that's why those worlds connect around that core value story, which is when you're building all that value through marketing, how are you realizing that in the sales conversation?
Can you give me the 3 layers of you gave us 3 levels of how a sales team can get started from the first talking to a prospect to unlock that noble intent in them?
So the first, before you're in the conversation, the first part is, have you considered their world and the value you can bring for them? I mean, the starting point is before the conversation. Then in the conversation, are you presenting that as a hypothesis, not as a fact, right? So what I found in my experience is people like you who are trying to achieve this, but struggling to because of this, and we help them achieve this. Is that relevant to you? Because that opens up the customer to go, let me share my thoughts. And then third is be curious to understand what that looks like, right? So prepare, position, and then unpack.
Nice. I'm picturing the graphics on your slide decks already. The 4 C's, PPU, the Sherpa on the image.
Yeah. Alliteration is memorable, but I love alliteration.
Something we touched on was like managing your diary and how we're on video calls. Even if we're local to each other, we hop on calls all the time now rather than driving for... If you have to drive more than an extra 30 minutes, you're doing a video call these days. But that's just one part of technology. Have you any insights you can share that you see around all these different businesses of how people are using technology to maintain that human touch in amongst all these busy days on Zoom calls and video calls?
Well, I think the first part, Paul, is we have to turn technology into our slave, not our master. Case in point, it's easy to set up meetings. It's easy to create double book meetings. It's easy to ignore other people's time and focus. So what happens is we don't protect our own calendar because it's too easy to do that. So the first place you have to start with technology is not something fancy. It's something quite basic, which is your calendar is the advertisement of your availability. So if you're not protecting time to do the thinking work, to do the prepping work, to do the whatever it may be, it's not going to happen. Someone's going to steal their time. So the first thing in technology is protect your time. The second part is then you jump ahead and saying, in that preparation, you can accelerate things by doing really good prompts in a generative language tool that I call it my thinking partner. What I like to say 10-80-10. 10% I prompted really well, 80% it brings me good information, and 10% I bring that human component. And the human component is not editing and spell checking, Paul, because here's what's going to happen. As we leverage more on these AI technologies, customers start to trust less. Because they're going, is this you speaking or is this something you created? So the reason you're using that partner is to help you structure something that you then add that human nature to. But the humanness is this. It's people can read your intention. People talk about body language training and tonality training. These are all master classes. The bottom line is simple. How you show up. Why do entrepreneurs, Paul, succeed so well without any sales training? And those that fail, by the way, don't realize they have to sell. But they can sell well because they have conviction of their value proposition. And it's that conviction that gives them confidence. And it's that confidence that gives them competence. So the human part is the piece that you can't put in just language, but that people pick up in your intention. I'm trying to help Paul here. I'm trying to help his audience. The people, I don't have to tell you that. It's innate in the way you show up and the value you're delivering. And that's the human thing. Because everything else can be codified, can be structured, can be accelerated. What you can't do is pick up what's Paul's intention. But man, the human brain can take multiple equations much quicker and pick up the body language, the tone, the intention. And that's what says, when we use salesy language, people immediately go flag. Not because my intent isn't right, because I realize they've heard this 1,000 times. But when I use language that is, I've been working with people like you in industries like yours, immediately it resonates because that's them. But it's the intention that sits behind it. I think it's intention. When I say intention, the intention of creating value for our customers, that noble intent that differentiates us from the technology. The technology then becomes a superpower, a tool on top of what we're doing, not a replacement.
Nice. And I think you can leverage certain tools as well, can't you, to make that thinking time easy for you. So thinking of all that layer of that journey you just talked about, there's tools you can use to protect your time. So I know, for example, meeting booking calendars will book the 30-minute call and however much you say either side to give you the downtime and the brain space. But then you've got tools, we've got more data than ever compiled, but there's tools that can help you organise through that. I liked your 10-80-10 rule. Yeah. And sort of, that's a nice process as well, isn't it? AI can start it, you can start with a prompt, you can get the ball rolling into AI, you can do 80% of the legwork and finding and organising, but then the final 10%, the real value is that last human touch.
Yeah, it's turning into a story of value that is authentic.
That's so true. Do you see anything different in the businesses you work with, whether they're a big enterprise or an SME with 10 people? I imagine these challenges are the same, just the scale's different.
Yeah, it's interesting because the scale of the challenge is much tougher as the organization gets bigger. I think the more we try to standardize, the less we prioritize the impact. So technology can become, what they call a tundra, a multi-headed monster. My good friend George from Membrane always says it becomes too much to do. So what happens in large organizations, we tend to lose connection with our front line because we're trying to overly manage that front line. Yet we say we're customer-centric. Basic case in point.
What do you mean then?
Basic case in point. Organizations will want an account plan. In that account plan, they want to know the data. But an account plan should be, what specific action do we need to take to close the gap between what a customer expects and what they experience? But that's not what it is. It becomes a tool for data. So now, in case Alan leaves, I'm protected. A call planner, instead of being a plan for how we're going to be relevant in the conversation, becomes an auditing tool to make sure Alan has followed the ABCDE step of our new process. So the challenge has become, the more we scale, the more we audit, as opposed to give people guidelines and free them up. And the way we fix it is through the sales managers. When we change the sales manager conversation, we change the sales conversation. And that's why what we believe is, without investment into sales management, no amount of training, no amount of consulting, no amount of technology has any sustainable impact, because they set the tone for the team. And a bad salesperson, you have a bad patch. A bad sales manager, you have a bad region. You have to work with those managers. So I'd say that's the big thing, is that as they scale, it actually becomes noisier. The flip side is when they're small, they're very ad hoc. So there's that fine line in the middle between structure that supports the customer value to structure that is purely auditing, and then to no structure, which is, well, we just arrive and hope we're prepared. So it's finding that balance in your sales playbooks.
I imagine companies as well, when they go through that growth from no structure, the bit in between before they get the big structure and too much structure, I imagine the person who has carried the growth, she might become the sales manager and now spends a lot of time doing what you said earlier, making sure these things are filled in, making sure all this is done, all this paperwork side. So I guess part of what you do might be on, actually, whether it's deliberate or not, freeing up people to be actually connecting with prospects, actually connecting, not just hitting a connect call number.
Yeah, that's it. So when you think about what you said now, most companies take top performing salespeople, promote them to sales management, no system in place to help them. Soon they're drowning, but also doing the salesperson's job and not their job. So we help them prioritize their impact by defining where their impact comes from. Then you take that one layer down, which is, how do you free up the salesperson to prioritize the impact? And their impact comes from four things. We build the right relationships through relevant conversations that create value and align outcomes. That's our job. So at least 50% of our time should be spent on that. So the minute we can teach managers to take control of their space and buffer the front line from the noise, we can free up the salespeople to be customer focused, not as a placard on the wall, but an actual way in which we run our culture.
Nice. Do you spot anything working across different regions? Do you spot any nuances that I know I do since joining Avidly? Sort of, well, in my immediate colleagues, for example, we've got Irish,
Yeah.
English, Norwegian, German, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, just in the European team, and we're all massively different. Are there any sort of top-level regional nuances that you think sales teams should be aware of in your experience?
I think there's a wonderful book I read called The Culture Code that speaks to a lot of the nuances. But before we get to the nuances, I want to kind of give a frame of how we position this. We believe that if a model is interchangeable across cultures. So the way we teach is we teach models of thinking. So for example, if you talk about pipeline health to most companies, pipeline health is, do I have enough value cover? To us, it's not value cover. It's, do you have enough value? Do you have enough volume for contingency? Do you have enough velocity? Is the deal moving? And do you have a healthy shape to protect the future quarters? Now, that model is translatable across every single culture. Okay. To execute that, you need to do 3 steps in a process. We call that our method. So model, method. And then you get to mechanisms, how you execute that. How you execute that can get nuanced based on different cultures. So, for example, in facilitation, if you're training in Singapore, you'll notice in the room a lot of expats and a lot of Singaporeans. The Singaporeans are brought up in a culture of command and control, meaning we are highly respectful in a hierarchy. So when you say to them, so what do you guys think? No one speaks until you've identified, could the team leader speak to the table and then? However, when you say, what do you think? All the expats in the room are opening their mouths. Normally the Irish and the English, but sometimes the Aussies. Right, but the point is, it's those nuances that you find. But what I do think, Paul, I think people sometimes hide behind this and are going, but are you practicing the disciplines? Because even with noble intent, it's transferable. So first, is your model of thinking mature? Is your method working? Do you have the right intention behind that? And then start to master those nuances, because there are nuances, but they're not the game changer, As we grow as a global business and facilitate around the globe, we have to learn this from a facilitation perspective. But from a sales perspective, I haven't picked up any nuance that has hindered me getting a sale.
Shows just how universal and how human these things actually are, about somebody connecting. If you're spitting facts and figures at me and discounts and this, I'm going to be turned off. But if you're actually listening to me and connecting with me, then I'm going to be invested in and trusting you, aren't I?
And often guide me. The other thing is they'll say, no, Al, and they'll tell you in our culture it's slightly different, and we'll get guided by the stakeholders in the business, because they buy into the intent. And I think this is the problem: is we think that if we show up as a polished version of ourselves, it's the best way. But that a robot can do. What it is you've got to come authentic and prepared, knowing you don't know it all, but with a desire to serve. And then people pick up that energy quickly, and then can relate to you, whether you South African or Japanese or American. It doesn't. And, you take America. Within America, you got 42 or 49 different cultures. It's all different, but it's intent that people buy into, I believe.
One last off-topic question before we wrap up. You talked about technology, and you talked about people sending loads of stuff on LinkedIn, and that's counterintuitive. I was just wondering if you've come across companies deploying some of these solutions, that like AI avatars going and doing videos on your behalf, and agents answering queries on behalf of a person. Have you seen any of this done badly or done well?
I think I've seen the entire gambit, and I always believe that the difference is substance. What are we trying to achieve? So why would we not use bots that can help us answer questions and source a far greater database than what we do? I won't trust a GP that's not asking GPT, because if a general practitioner or doctor is not asking a broader scope of data, I don't think you understand your profession, right? But they got to make the decision I'm going to trust. But then you see the extreme where we're removing the humanness from it. So if I create a great story with good substance, good meaning, and I can create that video in 17 languages, that means I'm adding more value to the world, right? But if I'm just think I can churn these out like production lines, you're missing the point of connection. You have to understand the narrative and the story and how it connects. So I think it's a yin and yang. You can really abuse this, and a lot of it is abused on LinkedIn, but then you see some people that just use it with mastery. And even sometimes you kind of know it's AI, you know they put the effort into the structuring of their technology, not just, hey, how do we do this at mass? Because you can read it now when you read people trying to connect with you on LinkedIn, you're going, my word, what human speaks like that? Or what about me is in this equation? And it's crazy because the ability for these things to help create relevant messaging is there. What's missing, Paul? Start again. Noble intent. You got to know what you're trying to do for your customers, and then technology is powerful. Otherwise, it just accelerates the inefficiency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get to blocked quicker. Yeah, use it, but don't abuse it. Okay, so lastly, what can somebody listening or watching do this week to get started so they can start selling with noble intent rather than pressure?
I think the number one thing they need to do is to understand the value they play in the equation. So many salespeople are undermined by Hollywood, undermined by their bosses, undermined by society. We seem like the job you get when you can't do anything else. It starts with our mindset. So the first thing you look at and going, understand something. The only reason a business exists is to sell something. If we don't have salespeople, we don't have economies or markets. 1 in 8 Americans is employed in sales. This is a profession. If you treat it like a profession, 1 in 8, right?
Wow.
Inbound sales, outbound sales, whatever it is, it's got to happen. But you have to come back to what it is you're trying to do that differentiates you. And it's simple. It's knowing that you're trying to serve, right? So the first thing they can do is think about their customer's world and what's the actual problem they're solving, right? I'll give you a practical example. I don't believe in objection handling. I believe in objection prevention. How do I do that? When I realize the customer is keen, I say, Paul, I've had a couple of customers that have been here before and pretty much as excited as you. But then they step away from the call and a couple of questions pop into their head. What about this? What about this? What about that? Are any of those questions running around your head? And they go, actual fact, L1 is. Okay, which one? Then they tell me, and I go, well, it's interesting you say that. Let me tell you how we've helped other people overcome that. I don't wait for them to object because I'm trying to Sherpa them through this journey. So I'd start by, if you say one thing to be noble purpose, realize that you can be a Sherpa, the value you can bring, but then the last moment, if sales is a profession, treat it like a profession, because it's the world's worst paying lazy job and the world's best paying hard working job, as long as you sell with noble intent.
Fantastic. What a note to end on. So if you've enjoyed listening to Alan like I have, please leave us a rating, leave us a comment with any queries, and if you've got wanting any suggestions, Alan's your man for helping you sell with noble intent. So leave us a comment on Spotify, 5-star review anywhere else, and hit that follow button not to miss future episodes. Thanks for coming on, Alan. Speak to you soon.
Thanks, Paul. Great to connect.
Hey, did you enjoy this episode? Then be sure to leave us a comment, a review, and hit that follow button. See you next episode.